talking about realistic outcomes, right, is important. Now, I do get on a little soapbox about this because I do feel like, without taking us too far down the rabbit hole, um, there's a beautiful combination going on in the field of counseling, which is you've got a camp that's really skilled in trauma and addiction, and you've got a camp that's really skilled in couples therapy and work. And like a lot of these issues, they are multidimensional. They have these co-occurring treatment plans that are going on. So on one hand, yes, the couples has to work through this is a betrayal. This is something where can we ever feel intimacy and trust? I think there's some great models around that of, sometimes it is grieving that the first marriage is over or the relationship that we had is lost in a way, but we are working to rebuild something. And there can be a very empowering part about that, but there's got to be room for grief. On the other hand, this couple is no different than any other couple out there. And while separate, and I would highlight separate from the addiction process, because it's in no ways it's saying that the couple's issues were a cause of that, but they do have a need for working on the things that all couples need to work on. So it's really important to treat the pain, the betrayal, the healing from that, establish a long-term plan for sobriety. Sometimes it's important to work with expectations. We get into things like a full cycle relapse versus an event relapse. So, in the process of recovery over life, it is true that event relapses are possible. Sometimes it is frequent relapses, depending on that. I do think every spouse has to decide what they're willing to go through, where their line and their boundary is of what they're going to tolerate in recovery and what they can't. But we see event relapse as being very different from full cycle in that an event relapse, I make a mistake, there was a weakness in my sobriety, my recovery plan, and I am proactive about getting back up on the horse, getting back towards recovery. Where a full cycle relapse, I go back into double life behavior. I start leaning back into old habits, and it's 6 months of secrets, right? That's the stuff that feels really scary to the partner because they don't want to be blindsided again. They don't want to feel like everything was going great and they were making these close memories only to feel like somehow their gut missed something again. And that's a terrible pain. Like that's where the compassion for the partner comes in, is wanting to know they're safe, wanting to know that their feet are on solid ground, knowing their reality. All of that is so crucial. The other part though is how do we build a system of intimacy? Like Gottman's model for couples therapy or emotionally focused couples therapy is kind of the other side of the treatment plan, where it's important to build just the stages, the experiences, the skills that all couples need. And too often, what I see is that couples that have been through betrayal work through the recovery side, and they work it takes an intense amount of energy to do it, but they usually stop there, and they have problems with satisfaction or they have problems with connection. And sometimes it's not that the recovery process failed or that they're needing more trauma work. It's sometimes they're needing to switch gears into what does it look like for us to build intimacy and connection. So the Gottmans have a great three-phase model of this. It's atone, attune, and attach. And the atonement makes room for the trauma and addiction treatment model plan to come in and saying, in no way are we going to avoid the grief, the heartache, and the need to establish safety. The attune is how do we start laying the foundations of, as safety returns and a plan returns and choice for both people return, how do we start leaning into what would this look like? And then the attach piece is where we really get to do the fun stuff. We get to feel what it's like to actually feel true intimacy again. And many couples would say, while honoring the pain they've been through, that they had no idea it could be like this, that this is the best their marriage has ever been. And so there's a lot of hope in that. I never want to sidestep the pain couples have to go through in this. But what I love to see is when couples have found their way through the darkness, through the heartache, and back to saying there's a deep relationship here, that we have survived this road together, and now we are living in an intimacy we didn't know was possible.